Welcome to the kbbreview podcast. I'm Andy Davies, and this is episode 4 of season 14. Now, I talk to a lot of retailers, as you can imagine, and if there's one lament that comes up again and again, it's that they don't make a decent margin on appliances. So if the margins are so tight for what is a big part of the customer's budget, is it really worth selling them at all? This is a really interesting topic as it goes to the heart of the relationship between retailers and suppliers, the importance of service and project management, and the ability of small businesses to make money in a difficult market. So can you make a decent margin on appliances? What is the role of rebates and incentives? Are the criteria for achieving them reasonable? Should you itemize appliance prices in quotes, or is the blended margin across the whole project more important? What don't suppliers understand about the way retailers sell or specify appliances? And are there any scenarios where kitchen retailers would choose not to sell them at all? It's all in this fascinating discussion with Trevor Scott from RFK, Belinda Dangerfield from Quadus Living, and Matt Turton from Bold Kitchens. He's actually an appliance supplier turned retailer, so his insight is really interesting. But first, the kbbreview podcast has been bringing you analysis, debate, interviews, and much more for well over 250 episodes. So if you've enjoyed it, it would be great if you could recommend it to your colleagues and any other KBB industry people you know. Simply tell them to search kbbreview, or one word, wherever they get their podcasts, and they'll find us. The bigger our audience, the more we can do. So pass it on. Okay, let's talk appliances with our very special guests. As always, in no particular order, we have kbbreview podcast veteran Trevor Scott from RFK. Hello, Trevor.
Good day to you.
Good day to you too, sir. Thank you very much. And we have two show newbies. Welcome to Belinda Dangerfield from Quadus Living. Hello, Belinda.
Hello, hi.
I've always thought, Belinda, that you just have the best Bond girl name ever.
Oh, Dangerfield. Oh, yeah.
Belinda Dangerfield. And we have Matt Turton from Bold Kitchens. Hello, Matt.
Hello there, Andy.
Hello to you. Right, let's start off with the intros. Trevor, give us the 10-second overview of RFK for those who don't know.
Okay, RFK, kitchen studio based in Rugby with a branch in Warwick, a contracts division, and for the last 18 months, a kitchen house franchise in Market Harborough.
Perfect. Belinda, tell us about Quadus Living.
Hi, so Quadus Living, we've been in Mere Green in Sutton Coldfield for the last 10 years. We were an in toto franchisee prior to that, since about 2007.
Another veteran. Matt, tell us all about the Bold Kitchens story.
Bold Kitchens is a small family business based in a little village called South Heenley between Barnsley and Wakefield in an old co-op building. We predominantly sell German, which would be Nobilia and Ballerina, and touch on English when somebody wants something that's traditional, shaker or painted, which the Germans tend not to do. That's us.
The way you describe that, you must be literally spitting distance from the symphony factory, I'm assuming.
Within 5 minutes, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Beautiful part of the world. And of course, before you were a retailer, you were on the other side of the fence, weren't you?
Yeah, I did 15 years in distribution. I was sales and marketing director at a now defunct JP Distribution. Then I did some time at Appliances.
So in a podcast about retailers selling appliances, it's almost as if I've planned it this way, Matt, isn't it? It's almost as if I planned it. Plus, actually, what's really interesting about you is the name of your company is Bold Kitchens, and you think, oh, that's quite clever because it's a bold kitchen, but that's not what the word bold is all about at all, is it?
No, it's not, no. I've got 4 boys, Ben, Ollie, Luke and Dan, and that's the bold.
Love that.
And my wife came up with that. I just late one night when we were setting up the business, and it was like, rather than be like the kitchen centre or, something like that. And it stuck, but everybody says, it's because you've got no hair. And I say, that's because it's spelled wrong.
Yeah, it's a good job you haven't got an Andrew as one of your sons. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, that's true, yeah.
All right, so we're going to talk about appliance margins. And as I've said, this is a thorny subject. And the lack of or minimal margins that independent retailers make on appliances, it is a tricky and difficult subject that we're going to pick our way through very carefully, I think is probably the best way to describe it. So let's dive straight in with you, Trevor, actually, because I'm going to throw a quote in your face here. You said that appliances were a necessary evil. So is it safe to say that you don't think you make a reasonable margin from your appliances?
Well, I don't think we make a reasonable margin. And even on those brands where we fully commit to them as we are required to under our selective distribution agreement terms, we still have to jump through so many hoops to get even close to a reasonable margin that makes us competitive with the online traders, that selling the product does become an anathema, a necessary evil, because we can't really sell a kitchen without the suite of appliances that go with it. And we're driven down a blind alley, kicking and screaming in some cases, regardless of whether that's the alleyway that we want to go down. Brand X as opposed to brand A, B, and C, which might give the consumer the best range of products to suit their needs, but don't fit the criteria with the manufacturer in terms of getting the best deal both for us and for them. So we end up having no choice but to sell 4, 5, 6 appliances from a singular brand to get the best deal. Whereas it might well be that we want to sell somebody else's hob or somebody else's extractor, and it just doesn't even come into the equation because it won't work out competitively enough.
So there's an awful lot of barriers being put in your way to even reach what would be an acceptable margin. Belinda, I know we're oversimplifying this to sort of start it off with here, but what's your view? Do you consider that you make a reasonable margin on your appliances?
We can do on product, I suppose, which hasn't been flooded onto the market. So where we go down more specialist brands, which aren't quite, like I said, so prevalent out there, we can make a reasonable margin. On others where it's flooded out there, the answer is no. Also on what we call lower end product, very entry level sort of stuff, we tend not to be able to make any form of margin on those at all because they're super competitive anyway in terms of price. And, so we took the decision, like I said, to focus more on some more of the higher premium brands or the exclusive brands where you've got your, maybe even a core sort of number of products as well. So we'll stick to the same few because we understand the products inside and out and we're able to talk about them in such great detail that actually the person isn't then focusing on the price. They're focusing upon the benefits of them, the value added. So we find on those products, we can actually make a reasonable margin. And in those instances, we don't even have to disclose how much we're realistically selling them for. They've bought into the product as part of the whole kitchen, or the whole kitchen sort of project design, quote, etc.
But even then, you have to negotiate and limit a certain amount of choice in order to get to the point where you make the reasonable amount of money on it. It's a necessary evil for you, but obviously for the consumer, it's very much a huge part of the kitchen, isn't it?
It is, but we start off actually, before we even talk about design, we're talking about appliances. And I know people say, well, for such little margin you get, why do you focus upon that? One, because the design is dictated by the type of appliances and just picking up certain signals of where people perceive where there's value, we're able to, when we come to the quoting stage, we're not going through books and books and books. We've already narrowed it down. So if anything, starting off right from the outset as part of a client brief means that whilst we've done the sales bit, when it comes to the closing bit, it's actually quicker and easier. They've bought into our knowledge, our experience. They're comfortable with what we're recommending and specifying for them, that we don't have to go to the nth detail with all the appliances. And it's if we know and like a brand ourselves, typically our clients, so unless they're very specific about their wants and needs, they want a specific brand of extractor or hood, they tend to go with our recommendations.
So, Matt, what about you? You're, as I say, a comparatively new retailer, but you've come from the supply side of things. What's your view of this now as a retailer? What do you think of the margins that are available to you on appliances?
I think, as the other two guys have said, I think it's quite difficult that we do exactly what Belinda does, in as much as part of the first part of the conversation is, yeah, you can talk about what they might like, a concrete grey slate door and handleless, etc. But we tend to focus quite early on the appliances, on the cooking. How do you cook? Are you experimental? Because what we found is we've won orders from other retailers where one retailer, for example, in Barnsley, spent over an hour trying to sell this lady a £1,250 steam oven, when part of her brief to them was, my husband's Asian, we do predominantly hob cooking, the boys throw a pie and a pizza in an oven, so I want a brand, but I just want to turn it on. So I put in a entry-level pyro oven, which I tend to put pyro in just about every kitchen that we can. And she was going, well, they were trying to sell me a £1,250 oven. So we kind of try and qualify what the customer's after we'll always quote a suite of a branded appliance, medium to, the BSH, the AEGs, etc. We'll always quote that kind of product with a view that we recognise where we are in terms of old mining villages, etc., etc. And there are people with lots of money and very deep pockets. Then there are quite a lot of people on tight budgets. So we'll always have in the back pocket, a drop down, if you like. So we'll swap into a lesser brand of a fridge freezer, for example, to save a little bit of money. But at that point, the customer's already bought into us. And again, part of what we say to people, which is kind of skirting around the question, Andy, really, but part of what we say to people is, I've got to like you and you've got to like me, because we're going to come into your house and we're going to make a mess. Once they've got the confidence, then, as Belinda says, they will go with the recommendation.
Does that mean you're selling at RRP then?
No, absolutely not.
Right.
I just think you just can't. You just can't. I mean, I look, say you judge every customer slightly different if they give you a budget or you're working to a budget, and ultimately we want the sale. So what we tend to do is we look across the whole thing as opposed to an individual price. Try not to go anything below, say, 20% on appliances if you want to talk margins. Sometimes we will, because we look at the bigger picture.
We'll look at the margin across the whole job thing in a minute, I think. But I'm curious, because when you said they were trying to sell a 1,200 quid steam oven, that sounded to me, Trevor, that's someone trying to hit a target. And I'm wondering what the role of, because it's not just about margin, is it? It's about, there's lots of rebates and incentives that go along with all these packages. I'm wondering where they play into the overall sum of adding up how much you make off an appliance.
Well, I mean, this can happen. I mean, whether it's a steam oven or whether it's just the fifth appliance, with a number of brands out there. I mean, I can only speak of the major brands that we work with, and I'm not naming any names at this point. There are deals on the table for up to £1,000 cashback. And to achieve that, you've got to hit that fifth appliance. And it might be a fifth appliance that they don't actually want or need, but you've got to sell it to them for £1,000 in order for them to get £1,000 back. Now, I don't make any extra money out going through that hoop jumping process for them, but the consumer benefits that I don't. Now, it might draw people into the showroom and it might help me sell them their overall kitchen package, but it doesn't help my margin. I'm spending a lot of time jumping through that hoop in order to shift boxes for a branded manufacturer. Where's the benefit to me?
Yeah, but you must have your own rebates type system set up.
Yeah, of course. Of course we do. I mean, we spend a lot of money with our major suppliers, and the rebate that comes at the end of each year is very worthwhile having. But it's not factored into the margin control on the day-to-day process of managing the business. So from that point of view, we're ignoring the retro, and we're purely looking at the buying price off the book and what we want to sell it for and the margin we're going to achieve on it. And then one way or another, manipulating the blended margin across the whole of the job to achieve the level of margin that we want. And when you're only making 20% on appliances, I can't run a business on 20% margin. So I've got to make it up somewhere else. So to a certain extent, where's the fairness in that for the consumers? They might think they're getting a good deal, but are they actually?
So what about you, Belinda? There's two elements to this, aren't there? One is incentivizing the consumer, as Trevor said, and the other is incentivizing you. So how much heed do you pay to them, or do you, like, if you hit targets, you hit them and thanks very much, or are you actively trying to hit them, if that makes sense?
No, we don't actively try to hit them. If we get them, it's a bonus. That's not expected. We don't want that to also influence us specifying the right product for the right person. Very much like what Matt was saying, I'm not going to oversell to try and hit a target. The margin is not significant enough for me to constantly just pitch one supplier over another. We'll always, as part of our client brief, when we're talking about the appliances and understanding how they're going to be used, we're already forming a picture of what type of product we're going to put into the quote. So no, we're not incentivized. It's definitely an extra bonus for the consumer. If they can get a cashback, absolutely. We're quite keen to explain that in more detail, because that sometimes can be a bit, I suppose, can be a bit of a grey area for the consumer. So that takes a bit of time to explain. But for us, we sell or we promote the product that we're comfortable with. And whilst there's loads of product out there, we've got to stick with a core product that we're extremely comfortable with, whether there's a growth rebate attached to it or an incentive to buy attached to it. We stick with it because it's an easy product to promote because we're fully knowledgeable about it. And we have a number of working displays, and we use our product all the time. So I very much will kind of promote a product that I would have in my house, not necessarily just something because it's got a particular margin or rebate or incentive attached to it.
Can I ask you to think back to when you were on the road, Matt? Because you would have been the guy going in and talking to retailers about incentives and things like that. And now that you are a retailer, have you sort of changed your mind about what works and what doesn't?
Again, to what the other guys were saying, I don't think it truly pushes you day to day with the incentive. I mean, yeah, you've got it at the back of your mind, but as Trevor says, it's something that we treat as icing on the cake. We don't factor in that as a margin at all. I think, when you look back at what I did, and predominantly, if you scrape back everything and you sat in one of these meetings at one of these companies, you realise the only thing they talk about is volume, is numbers. They don't really, might be slightly controversial here, and you might want to slap me, but at the end of the day, that's all they want to move. They just want to move boxes.
It's a sausage factory.
It is, absolutely. I mean, when I went to a manufacturer, it was literally, it didn't matter at that stage what you were selling. It was just about the number you were selling of the month. So it could be 10,000 traditional standard extractors. It was the number, just keeping the factories rolling. That was all that was needed. And you get towards the end of the month, and they would drop margins to hit targets. So they would dump stock. So there'd be containers coming in. So I would do a deal with a leading distributor, for example, only to find that somebody on a different part of the company had used some rebate that they'd got kind of under the table. And so they were selling a product. That distributor would be selling out that product for less than I was selling it into a built-in distributor. And you just go, where's the sense in this? Well, they've moved a lot of those this month. And you just go, but nobody's making any money.
Every part of a supply chain has margin attached to it, obviously, and you guys are at the end of it. You're at the end of the supply chain before the consumer gets it, and so you're the last one to get dealt whatever margin is left, if indeed there is any left. Let's go back a little bit and talk about sort of margin across the whole project. So I think every retailer I've ever spoken to about this subject says the same thing, which is no, we don't really make any money on appliances if you isolate them, but obviously we sell them for one reason only, and that's because we want to control the project. We don't want appliances coming in on somebody else's van, which makes total sense. So how much effort do you put into measuring total project margin, and how much do you sort of itemize and fiddle with that to compensate for things? I'm not sure that question makes sense. Trevor, help me out.
Well, it's the honest John philosophy, really, isn't it? If I worked purely on the principle that I want to make margin X on furniture and margin Y on appliances because that's all I can achieve, then you add the two together and I don't actually achieve a profit margin that is viable for the business. So I've got to make that gap up somewhere, and it's where do I make it up that's legitimate? And I'm not going to suddenly make 1,000 base units 3 times the price it should be just to gain the margin back. I've got to be a bit more creative with that. And I've got to do it in such a way that is seen as being acceptable to the consumer, or morally speaking, acceptable to my designers who have consciences and do want to make sure that they're doing the best thing that they can for their clients at the same time as earning a living for themselves and keeping us all in business. We'll have things like a project management fee. And I don't think it's unreasonable that we put a project management fee because we are project managing the entire installation. But, honestly speaking, some of that missing margin in appliances is buried in that project management fee. I'd be very surprised if I'm alone in applying that kind of technique.
Well, there you go. Belinda, do you apply that kind of technique?
We don't charge a project management fee, no. And that's only, in fairness, that's only because Doudos is a supply-only company. We actually don't fit. My husband's company fits, however. So we separated it out many, many years ago. And some of it was about cash flow, making sure we got our money at the right time. And we invariably found that my husband works for other companies as well, but we invariably found that when he went in, they up-spec'd on the installation side. So with us doing a supply only, we tend not to do project management. However, we do a blended margin, like you said. And ultimately, it's not just about the margin. Sometimes it's about the value. So we will look at each job independently, of each other or of rather than across the standard process that we apply. And we will with my designers, we'll make a conscious decision as to what figure we promote. Now, we don't necessarily break down our quote down line item by line item and present that to them. Because like I said, what we're doing is we're adding value into the whole project. Specifically, when people ask me, well, can I buy from the internet? The answer is absolutely yes. However, these are the caveats attached to you buying elsewhere. The caveats will be something simple like, it's your responsibility to make sure the appliance is there on time, because if they're not, and, they come several weeks later, you may be charged by your fitter additional monies. It's your responsibility to check that the product is the right product, and also that you take it out the box and it hasn't got any damage to it. So we put some of those caveats in. And by the time we give them a whole list of things that they must do, they almost go, oh, it's not worth it. We also will then say, well, it's then your specification to let the electrician know what's the electrical specification and where it should be positioned, because that's now no longer under our control. Whereas what we offer as part of our kitchen design and supply process is all that information, any technical queries they might have, and even afterwards, if they've got any queries on how to use the product, we will happily go out and show and go through that with them. So we're adding value into buying appliances from us. And like I said, it's not a straightforward, let's, put the price down low, so we're competitive with the internet. It's very much the price is the price, but this is the reason why we sell at this price. And if you don't want to purchase at that price, these are all the caveats that you must ensure you adhere to. And that's worked quite well for us.
Trevor?
Yeah, well, if I can just jump in there, I applaud all of that. And in essence, we do exactly the same. But the but is, there's an awful lot of added value being put into that process for a low margin. So where's the fairness in that? I'm sending staff on training courses. I'm having evenings running events. I've got plenty of product on display. Most of it is live burning electricity, which is expensive. We've got very well-trained staff who've been on all the training courses. We provide all of the added value, but we're doing it all for a really quite miserly margin when it compares to the margin that we achieve for the overall project. And I really don't see that as being completely fair.
So what about you, Matt? Are you a blended margin approach, or do you itemize things on a bill?
I break the appliances down. Because at that point, I've had the conversation. We know the products inside out. All our products are live that are in the showroom, apart from the gas ones. And you talk through the customer, you show them the dishwasher with the cutlery tray, et cetera, and you've got them on side. When I do the quote, I give them the furniture price. I give them the solid surface price, which is maybe another subject we could talk about in terms of solid surface and margins, because that's only going one way. And then I give them the brand, I give them the code, and I give them the price. And I give them the code so they can say, look, I want you to check this, check that it's the right oven that you've got, check that it's not over-spec'd. So all the time for me, you just build in that confidence with the customer. I also, I may be a little bit different in this, I do check the online prices before I quote them. We can compete. There are a few rogues out there in terms of distribution, but most of the time. And then if we have to move brands, hopefully we've got the confidence of the customer at that point, and they never really question it. I don't really get, well, I can buy that. In fact, I can't actually think that I can buy that oven cheaper elsewhere. We don't have it. Because of where we are, we don't get busloads of people in, but when they come to see us, we've got a pretty high conversion rate. But we are a little bit remote on purpose, I suppose, as well.
So what do you think, Matt? What don't suppliers understand about the way independent retailers work in this area, do you think? What don't they get?
One of the things that's absolutely amazed me, jumping from one side of the fence to the other, is just the lack of representation, right? Up until 8-9 months ago, other than companies that I've contacted to come and see me, up until 9 months ago, I'd only had 6 cold calls from reps across the door in 5.5 years. One distributor rep lived in the next village. We'd been open 4 years, and she didn't even know we were open. And I still find it, Of course, we're getting more now. Why are we getting more? Because business is a lot harder for the suppliers. And all of a sudden, it's not just rolling in on the back of COVID, et cetera, et cetera. But I find the lack of involvement I'm not tarring them all with the same brush, but the lack of involvement when they come in, they want to go, there's the offer, there's the new product, or there's a new brochure, and they want to get out as fast as possible. None of them are particularly what I'd call the old school account managers, where they talk to you and come in to Trevor and Belinda and say, so how are we doing? What have we got coming up? What can we do? How do we promote the business? Do we do this? What about doing this on the evening? They just want to get in and out as fast as possible. I find it quite astonishing.
That's a volume thing as well, isn't it? That make a certain number of calls over a certain period. It's all about volume at the end of the day, isn't it? So,
yeah.
I mean, you've talked about this, Belinda, a lot, as have you, Matt, about the relationships you have with your consumers, about enthusing your designers, about knowing these products inside out and back to front. That, to me, never quite marries up. Because I know that's how most independents work, obviously. But that never quite marries up then with the idea of suppliers demanding a certain amount of space in the showroom or a certain number of displays, because that's not about enthusing the individual specifier, the designer, if you like. That's just about square footage. And I know those two things don't marry up to me.
No, I'd agree with that. I mean, the problem you've got, even though we've got a reasonable size showroom, we've only got 5 big displays. So as a full displays rather than partial little ones. And so we're limited with what we can show. And when people want 70 to 80% of your product on one brand alone, and then X amount on another brand, what they're saying is they want you as a solo studio. And the benefits of becoming a solo studio isn't there anymore. You're not getting enhanced terms. You might get access to a certain product or two, but it's not necessarily the core product that we're going to sell, because it's not within the portfolio of products that you're comfortable with, you're enthused about yourself. So I find that's alarming, that you'll get one brand going in and they pretty much want to wipe out absolutely every display, which means some of the smaller brands where, again, we haven't seen reps, because I think they know that if we're a particular type of studio and it's marketed on our website, they haven't got a hope in hell of actually having any representation on any of my displays. So what we've started doing is we put another display and we put it upstairs. So again, you've also got some front-facing displays in the window, some displays which are working displays and stuff like that. So we can't appease them all. So we're now starting to look more towards some of the brands where they are niche, they are probably lesser known, and we are looking at giving them more space than they could have ever achieved historically. And that's because I don't feel anymore that we're getting the benefits of being a solus brand sort of ambassador.
This is the thing, Trevor, isn't it? This is what I can't square, is the reward doesn't seem to match the demand, particularly when it comes to margin, obviously.
Well, yeah, I mean, the whole business about how much square footage a brand supplier wants to have of your showroom is quite frustrating, because it has changed. In fairness, it has changed a little bit during and post-COVID, because there's been a lot of pressure on supply chain, and now there's a lot of pressure on volume demand. But there was a point, and I think one of your other contributors in the magazine mentioned it. I've only got 100% of my showroom to give you. So if brand A wants 70% of it and brand B wants 40% of it, well, somebody's got to lose 10%, or we're not having either of it. And, this is very true. Now, in fairness to a major supplier, they've blended the 3 top brands that they offer now, where as long as you're hitting your 80% of floor space is a commitment to the 3 brands, then you can do what you like with the other 20%. That doesn't leave a lot, that's the odd fridge, wine cooler and a cooker, really, isn't it? So it doesn't give you many opportunities to show off the virtues of a wonderful product that another brand has gone to an awful lot of trouble of developing, gone to an awful lot of trouble of demonstrating to you and getting you on side and infusing you. And then when you go and put it on display, your other supplier comes along and says, we can't display that because that infringes your selective distribution agreement terms. So you're going to have to take it off. It's incredibly frustrating.
Matt, it kind of goes against the independent part of independent retailer, doesn't it? It's almost like being a pub owned by a brewery, that you have to sell their beer or else. What would a supplier need to come into your showroom and say to you that would make you go, yes, great, I'll go with you because that's exactly what I need to get to make the money out of it that you need?
I think it would be a good suite of products. I think sometimes the offers that some manufacturers bring in are far too complicated for the simple independent kitchen retailer. And they'll do 14 integrated dishwashers rather than doing a good, better, best. And then you struggle for stock on some of them because they have got 14 integrated dishwashers. I think something that would be more, I mean, they use this, I think the common term is premier partner. It's a little bit like when somebody dies under a legend. Every manufacturer's come out with, you're now a premier partner, or you're this, or you're that. When it's not actually that special for the commitment that the independents have to put in. And I think it should be judged on turnover. It should be judged on what you're selling. But I don't think the manufacturers are close enough to the retailers. And when I say that, I mean somebody who's based in, say, Harrogate or in central London is going to sell more high-end appliances than somebody that's, based in an old mining village in Barnsley. We do sell paralytic, but we've only ever sold a couple of steam ovens in the time that we've been open. And, it's like they were saying about the cash back. You've got to work really, really hard to get the cash back. And that's for the consumer. And then the last one, for the consumer to understand it, you've almost got to sit them down for half an hour and hold the hand through it in terms of the claim back. It's a difficult one. I mean, most manufacturers are going direct now, so they're working with the distributor margin, so to speak, and what the distributors were taking out of it before. Because that was always the argument, there's another mouse to feed in the chain with distribution. Well, most of them have come around distribution now. There's still a few left, but not many, true distributors. But it's a tough one. Do they put another £150 on the retail price of everything to pass it on as margin? I don't know, because somebody within those organisations will break it because somebody's offering them 5,000 appliances over the next 3 months. If we could all hold hands and say, yeah, this is what we're going to do, then it'd be great. But I can't see it happening. It's a tough one. It really is.
There's legalities around the fixing of things like that as well that'd be very difficult as well, I imagine. Yeah,
absolutely.
I mean, can you see a scenario, Trevor, where you don't sell appliances? You floated to me before the idea that you literally just hand the computer over to the consumer in the showroom and get them to order it themselves and pay for it separately. Can you foresee a scenario where you would just go, look, you know what, just get it delivered here on this day, but you pay for them separately?
Well, as Bat has alluded, a number of major brands are now trading direct with the consumer with their own version of a recommended retail price. What is the problem with us as retailers having a portal that has access to however many brands we choose to offer, and we can offer good, better, best to our consumers? They can make the decisions as to which ones they go for, and then we just guide them to the portal and they place the order. And our arrangement with the supplying manufacturer is that they guarantee stock, they guarantee delivery to site during the week that we require it, and at the end of the month we get a commission. And that commission would be lower than our margin, but we haven't had to do anything for it. We haven't had to raise the finance, we haven't had to store it in the warehouse, we haven't had to deliver it, we haven't had to check quality, replace goods if they're faulty or short delivered and send fitters back. So I would actually work on a much lower margin if I didn't have to do anything for it other than point the consumer towards a portal and make them pay for it direct and cash them a check at the end of the month.
I mean, that makes a lot of sense to me, Belinda. But equally, devil's advocate, if I walked into a kitchen shop and I couldn't buy appliances there and I was being told to get my credit card out and buy them myself, I just think that was really a bit odd. But I entirely get what Trevor's saying. Do you?
Yes and no. I can understand in a utopian world that would be great. However, you actually said that you've gone through the specification and helped them choose. So you've actually done part of the work anyway. So if you're just going to adopt a dropship method of, letting them place an order and it getting delivered to them, you're giving up valuable margin. You've already said you get little to no margin and you're wanting to give that up. So for me, I find that a bit of an oxymoron there. But for me, I feel that if I'm doing the work, I want to be, rewarded for it, and if that margin just happens to be below the RRP, I'm quite happy with that because it just means I can control the process. I don't like things that go outside of the process because the knock-on consequence, the client going, oh, sorry, my appliance hasn't arrived yet. Can we put a fitting off for a week? The answer is no, because we have diaries that we have to plan. We're diarising fitters to go to various places. So I want to be in control of that. I don't want the client going, I'm so sorry, but they were out of stock. So they're going to send me a replacement. And it's going to be in 3 weeks' time. Can you book your fit in for that day? It's like, I've got other priorities. So.
Is that your warehouse?
Yeah. That warehouse that I've just shown you on screen there could be half the size if I didn't have to take into stock all of the appliances. And I didn't buy 10 of them at a time in order to get them at the best price, or to guarantee that I can supply the dishwasher or the oven or the hob to my consumer, because the supplier is going to run out of stock. So there's a lot of pros and cons, and I agree it's controversial, my suggestion, but I disagree that it doesn't have validity.
But it's a false economy saying that if I buy 10, I get a better value. You're not considering the non-value added cost of storing, picking and processing and all of that, and the cash flow. So, sticking to a core set of appliances, let's just say, we said two, good, better, best, and you have somewhat on a Kanban system, is a much better way of, I suppose, ordering and distributing internally. But to have a warehouse for storing, it is really a false economy on thinking you're getting best price, because I don't believe you are.
I think this comes down actually to one of the reasons why suppliers don't necessarily always understand it, because everybody's business is different. Every independent operates in a different way to others, and it depends on location, it depends on size, it depends on average price and all those things, and therefore everybody's methodology is different, and therefore to apply any set of rules to lots of them at once is always going to be difficult. What do you think, Matt? Can you ever see a point where you wouldn't sell them? What would the scenario have to be?
We went through a few months around the COVID time thinking, just what are we doing here? We muddled through, and because we're not doing 2 kitchens a week, we're doing a kitchen a week, and because we muddled through without getting hurt too much, and, taking products off display and fitting them into customers' kitchens and temporary ovens and things like that. And we got to a point where we thought, is this, for the margin, is this actually worth it? And then you start getting a few service calls and stuff like that where, the customer's not getting sometimes the best service, and then they always come back to you. And again, like you said, Trevor, it just, because you're spending time on it, it just erodes the margin on appliances. I don't think there'll be a time that we don't do it. I think we have to look at the margin across the whole project that we're doing. But I would like to see a select, again, if you've been in the industry long enough, you'll remember when distributors, for example, used to do a pack leaflet that would last a month or 3 months. And on that, you could say, bloody hell, that's a good deal on that XYZ brand. Let's sell this for the next 3 months because they've dropped the price on that. But the pack offers got eroded some years ago, and now they're really just standard trade prices. So all they've done is kind of dragged it down to what the prices were, rather than you feeling as a retailer that you benefited from it. I think if you look at the buying groups, if you look at, say, Euronics, for example, well, maybe they've got the idea of keeping it all in central warehousing or pulling it from the manufacturers and doing all the logistical side. I don't know, but yes, again, it's a different subject, isn't it? It's on the different side of the appliance fence. The freestanding boys, I suppose, who are, they've got appliance showrooms as opposed to, we predominantly want to sell furniture because that's where the margin is. It is, I've used the term, like you have, Trevor, many, many times, it's a necessary evil, especially when it doesn't turn up, when it's been in stock for weeks and weeks and weeks. And we don't stock too much in terms of appliances. We don't have the space, or quite honestly, the finances to put into it. And we're trying to, our son has just come into the business having been a fitter for the last 18 months. So I'm trying to get him on training courses. It's amazing how little training courses on appliances there are out there at this moment in time. But I'm trying to get him onto that, and I'm trying to get him into a core of product. So you can sell, that's the pyro oven we sell, that's the combi that goes with it, that's the preferred dishwasher. So he's got it quite simply in his mind, rather than, looking at 14 dishwashers, as I said before. Which one do I quote the customer here? It's tough. It really is tough. But the appliance boys and girls just they're not close enough to the independents. They really aren't. Well, I said that goes back to what I said before. They're all coming out of the woodwork now, but they're coming in and out.
What's funny is, like I say, it's lots of individual businesses, but as a combined channel, independents sell more built-in appliances than anybody does. Trevor?
Now, I'll give you 2 examples of products that really I don't think, I mean, I can only speak specifically from my own experience with our businesses, but I think I'm right in saying that American fridge freezers, range cookers, us retailers of fitted kitchens give very little house room to freestanding range cookers and American fridge freezers. And there's two reasons for them. We can't make any money on them, and we don't make any money on selling fresh air. So in a 1,000 mil space that an American fridge freezer would fit into, I could get a nice 300 mil larder and a 600 integrated fridge freezer housing, both of which are going to achieve full margin. And I can put anybody's fridge freezer into it that I choose, whatever the best deal is at the time. Whereas if I sell that fresh air, probably the best price I can get for brand X's 20 cubic foot American fridge freezer is 10% above what they can buy the same thing from one of the sheds. So why would I do that? Why would I make a business based on designing fresh air that somebody else can make diddly squat out of and me make even less than diddly squat? Not going to happen.
Well, look, it's a fascinating subject, this, and obviously we could talk about this for hours, couldn't we? And I think we can safely say we've not moved it on in any way in the last 40 minutes, have we? But look, I think a lot of it, it's funny that the themes run through all these thorny issues, and one of the themes that runs through all of them is this slightly fractious yet symbiotic relationship between suppliers and retailers. It's kind of this slightly love-hate relationship that they all have, and I think this one's going to run and run, because sooner or later someone's going to run out of patience, and it's going to be interesting to see when that happens. But look, thank you so much for your time as always. Thank you, Belinda. Thank you, Trevor, and thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.